Can you please state your first name, age, and the city you currently reside in?
Okay. My name is Britney. I'm 35 and I live in Maricopa.
Can you tell us how many children you have, their ages, and if you're currently expecting or pregnant?
Yeah, I have 2 biological children,
Okay.
and then I have 2 stepchildren who I've raised since they were babies.
What is rewarding about being a mother? What challenges do you face as a mother?
I think a lot of it's rewarding. I mean, I like being around kids in general, so I'm a birth doula, and I taught Sunday school for years. Like, I just like kids, and I just like entertaining their interests and making them smile. That's kind of just what brings me joy, is like having, making kids happy. And the biggest challenge is always just like not having enough support. Trying to do so much like by myself. We were pretty poor for a long time, and like I had to work really, really hard to provide for my kids, like just the basic necessities. Like I felt like I was never able to slow down. We couldn't get ahead because we were spending so much time like just to not fall behind. So, and it's hard to get childcare. I don't trust a lot of people with my kids. So, and my 2 biological children are autistic. So, it's just like, I don't want to just leave them with anybody because of the horrible things that could happen. So I struggle a lot with trying to have free time to myself and just like not feel like I'm running on empty all the time.
And when you say like support, like just not having enough support is a challenge, would you say like in what areas? Would you say like financially or like emotionally or just different areas?
Yeah, everything. Honestly, like financially, obviously, like it's a huge issue when you're trying to raise children. Having childcare that I could rely on, so I could find more gainful employment, or work hours that weren't wild, because we were always like working opposite hours. We were always working like full time, sometimes 2 jobs, my mother lives in Ohio. His mother lives like out here, and she like couldn't handle our youngest because he has very like high needs. So yeah, it's just like I couldn't go anywhere by myself, with my youngest being very sensory seeking. They try to run away, or they need a lot of stimulation, so they run around a lot. So also having places that I can go and they can get out that energy and it's safe. I just don't think our current society is really built to help us raise our children. Like, they kind of leave us on our own to do everything, and it's very difficult.
So how was your pregnancy experience or experiences? For example, were they planned? What was your overall like outlook about being pregnant, and did you have any complications or support?
Okay, so I always wanted a lot of kids, and so my biological children were planned. My husband's previous children, they were a surprise for him. My pregnancies were pretty awful. My first pregnancy with my oldest son, it's mostly just because I was working like 80 hours a week at the time. I wasn't poor at that time either. I was with my ex-husband, but I was working in food service and I was a manager, and didn't have a whole lot of support in my restaurant. So like a lot of times I was just like working open to closes, and I was super pregnant. I had what's it called? I had preeclampsia. So my shoes wouldn't fit on because I had swelling so bad. I would have to wear like the Doc Marten sandals that's like strap over, and socks, like, because I couldn't put shoes on, and they still were making me work. Like, it's like. So then when I told them I was going to take off the whole 12 weeks, like, my boss was upset with me. I was like, I work 70 hours a week. Can I please spend time with my first child? And then with my youngest, the pregnancy was just awful. It was considered high risk because of my weight and my previous pregnancy. And the birth of my oldest son was an emergency C-section. And so they didn't want to let me go too far past my due date for the second one, even though I really did not want another C-section. I was really trying to avoid it. And but yeah, I was sick that whole pregnancy. I was hospitalized several times. I got the flu, and then I couldn't keep liquids down. I was peeing blood because I had so dehydrated that it was just awful. So I had to have IVs, and if I would bend over, my blood pressure would go crazy and I'd pass out. It was just a bunch of random issues. So after that one, I was like, I don't think I can go through another pregnancy. And and then that cesarean was also awful. The anesthesia failed, and so then they had to put a bunch of narcotics in my IV because I was screaming because I could feel everything. So
during you did have a couple of complications. So were there any warning signs, or did you have your checkups, or did anyone mention anything about your potential risk, or anything, or early detection or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean my doctors were pretty good. Like I said, I'm a birth doula, so there's sometimes it's frustrating because the birthing industry and the medical field in hospitals, they're 15 to 20 years behind the current technology and science. And I was constantly reading books and medical journals about the latest information. So sometimes there was I would try to discuss something with my doctors, and they're like, oh, no, we're going to do it this way. Even just having to schedule the second cesarean. Because I know that, well, yes, you do have the potential to rupture by doing a VBAC. You're also more likely to die in your second cesarean, having the cesarean, than you are from a rupture. So, it's stuff like that can be really frustrating, because also, as a Black woman, a lot of times I'm afraid to push back too much and then get treated badly. Actually, when I had my first son, I was being very severely abused by one of my nurses, and did not know that until years later. But whenever people weren't around, I think she was stealing my morphine too, or just switching it out with saline or something, because I had no pain meds. Every time I'd push the button, I would feel nothing, and I was in horrible pain until they switched me over to the ibuprofen 800 pills, and then I finally got some relief. So I thought I thought morphine just didn't work on me. And then when I had my youngest, I'd hit that morphine button and I could feel it. I was I was not getting morphine last time at all. Yeah, so, and she did some other really horrible things to me, but it's I have a hard time speaking up for myself too, which is partially why I became a doula too, so that doesn't happen, especially to other Black women and other queer women, and or birthing people, because I don't. You can have great birthing experiences, and that's what I want for people. you know, and mine just were not so great. And I try not to like bring that to anything. Sorry, I know I'm going off topic, but sorry, I rant, so sorry.
No, it's fine. Where did you or do you get advice about or information on pregnancy, childbirth, or just parenting in general? So where do you get advice or information about these topics? And do you think this information was at the time or is useful to you or relevant to you?
Okay, like I said, I do read a lot of books. I'm part of like a doula collective of just doulas of color in Arizona. And I mean, I go to the internet for a lot of things. Like I read a lot of like, I try to approach everything like from a trauma-informed perspective. And so generally, like if I'm looking for information of like something to deal with my kids, like I usually try to look, okay, well, you know, what could be the root of this and how do I help them through it? So yeah, I guess like a lot of reading.
What type of things do you do to make sure that you're healthy? So healthy for yourself and then for your children and your family. And what sort of things make it difficult for you to achieve good health or that ideal health?
So until very recently, I was doing absolutely nothing for my health at all. And I was suffering quite badly. I started caring for my mental health a couple of years ago and started getting medications, especially to like treat I have obsessive compulsive disorder, which makes it very difficult to parent small children, hilariously, because, you know, you're like, oh, like this has to be exactly like this, and if it's not, then something bad's gonna happen, and then your kid comes and is like, so, yeah, I think not taking care of yourself, it makes it so much harder. I was so much constantly just stressed out, and so yeah, that was like a big thing for me. And then now I am currently working on trying to have better boundaries, which is why my husband and I are separate. So yes, because that's very negatively affected my health as well. I just did not have any real boundaries at all, and I let people take advantage of me. I tend to like help other people, and then like I don't ask for anything in return ever, and then a lot of times it's not reciprocated either. So a lot of times I'm just constantly putting myself out for people, and then nobody gives that back. So yeah, I'm trying to change that now. I have my back actually has been getting progressively worse since I had my youngest, in the spot where they put the spinal in. So I think that there's trauma to my spine. So I finally like started scheduling doctors to look into that. I also like have been having a hip issue for years, where my hip pops out of the socket and I have to pop it back in, just like all the time when I'm walking. And so yeah, so I'm just finally like starting to schedule doctor's appointments for myself and prioritizing myself, because yeah, I was like, I can't keep doing this. I was just breaking down.
Yeah. So what type of support, resources, or events would you like to see in your area?
Oh gosh. I'm not even sure. I actually like started several events, but I haven't been able to do them just the last couple of years. I used to run a massive play date for like disabled children, and like I would do it in late November every year, and then I'd have Santa come out and give all the kids gifts. We'd feed everybody. It was all totally free. But oh my God, it was so much work, because nobody would ever really help me. It would just like be me and my kids like running everything until the day of, and then I'd have a few volunteers the day of. But yeah, I'd love to see more stuff like that where I don't have to do it. Like, I don't want to be the only person in the city organizing stuff for the autistic kids. Like, I would love to see more mental health services in our area. Maricopa sucks as far as mental health stuff. We have like one place that accepts access, and that's all they accept. If you have anything else, they won't take you. And like we were on access at one point, but then we also had insurance through my husband's work, so access was our secondary, and they wouldn't take us. And then after that, I don't even know if we have any other mental. There might be now, more recently, but it generally you have to go out to Chandler or Casa Grande. And I mean, I'd like that for my kids as well. I did actually have my kid with a child therapist in town, but they're hard to find. They're hard to get into. More things that are like more contained and safer for kids to go to. Like I said, since my kid's a runner, it's really hard. Sometimes like I want to take them to a dog park because they're closed, and like the regular playgrounds, they're not enclosed. And when my child was younger, they would constantly run to the parking lot to look at the cars. Super dangerous. So it would just be me at the park, like for 40 minutes, running after them, trying to keep them out of the parking lot all the time, and then I'd be exhausted and they'd still have tons of energy. So, but then you can't take young kids into dog parks a lot of times. Like we would get kicked out if we would go in the dog park because you can't have any kids under 12. So it's just like, like sometimes I just feel like there's nowhere for me to take my child, and they need to be outside. And I need to be able to take them somewhere that I don't, have to run a marathon to let them have fun.
What are some of the things that are taboo about pregnancy, birth, and parenting? So what are people not discussing that you feel like needs to be discussed?
Okay. So as a doula, I focus on primarily transgender parents and communities of color. I'm also autistic, so I am trying to. There is a lot more information coming out about how to support transgender parents in birthing, but there's not information on how to support people with sensory processing disorders. And as a doula, a lot of the techniques that we learn to help people through labor will not work for somebody with a sensory processing disorder, because it's a lot of like touch. Some people, some autistic people cannot stand to be touched. I'm trying to make it so that people who traditionally I was playing with the mic, who maybe wouldn't have considered having kids in the past because of barriers like that, like trying to help them so that they can, because I feel like, people who have who might be more sensitive, a lot of times they make really good parents if they have the support. People want to say if you're not financially stable, you shouldn't have a child. But you have people who have tons of money, and the only reason their kids are surviving is because they can afford a nanny. Those parents are the same amount of neglectful. It doesn't matter what someone's economic status is. If you're going to work for your kids, you're going to work for your kids no matter what. So, I really also try to fight against the idea of I don't tell people you should go and have a baby if you're homeless or anything, but I think that we need to rethink how we support each other as a community, and we do need to make it so that we can have kids. I feel like millennials don't really have a lot of kids, and I totally support people who want to be child free. I never pressure anybody into having kids, but if you don't want to have kids just because you think that or you're not sure how you're going to make something work, but you actually have the desire for it, I don't think that's fair. And I don't think that it's so hard to escape out of poverty too when you're Black or indigenous. A lot of times it's a very racist idea to tell people if they're not financially stable that they shouldn't have kids, or that if they're not at a certain point in life, because in the end, that just means that we're going to be the ones not having kids. Like, white people are going to be able to have all the kids they want because they're more likely to be stable. So yeah, I think that we all need to come together to make it so that we can have children and raise children safely. And I don't think there is enough talk about that. That's probably like one of my biggest things, is like shaming parents who are in poverty. And like I said, when I started having kids, I wasn't in poverty, and then ended up in poverty. Like, you know, so things are unpredictable too. But like I said, I mean, you will see me in line, like getting them Christmas gifts if like I have to do that. If I have to go to a food bank and stand in line for 4 hours, that's what I'm doing. Like, whatever I have to do to make sure my kids have food in their stomach every night, I'm gonna do that. Doesn't matter how much money I have. You know, my kids are my focus, and I think that's just how people are. Like, if your kids are your focus, it doesn't matter what your financial status is. So, yeah, and I think community support, honestly, is so much more valuable than financial support a lot of times. You know, having a grandparent who can babysit your kids, that's a huge deal. That's way more than if somebody gave me money so I could send my kids to childcare, because now I also have like some peace of mind as well. Or just somebody who you really know and trust, like maybe somebody who's like in your community, so you're not having to go with somebody random, or with I'm not a super big fan of like the big daycare centers. Like, I know they're totally necessary, but like I don't like to send my kids to them, because I feel like your kid's either gonna get bit or they're gonna bite somebody. So there's a lot of stuff like that. And my niece like broke her arm at one because they weren't watching her while they were changing her diaper, and she rolled off, and like they didn't tell her mother that that's how the injury happened for like 3 days. She had to like get a lawyer to find out how her kid's arm got broken. Like, and yeah, I think that yeah, I don't know. I just think that there needs to be a really huge shift on our idea of what it means to raise children, because it really cannot be just the job of a single parent or of just a nuclear family. I think it's so much better if everybody helps, or you have more people helping.
So, in the United States, Black and Native American women have some of the worst maternal and infant health outcomes. So, for example, the number of women who die in childbirth or pregnancy-related complications, the number of infant deaths, etc. Why do you think that is, and how does this make you feel?
So, I mean, it's definitely medical racism, 100%, because I've had so many people try to give me like, oh, well, but it's probably because of this. No, it's not. It's medical racism, plain and simple. We're less likely to be listened to when we feel that something's wrong. We are less likely to be given pain medication to deal with our issues. That's just statistically, like you can just go and look at the statistics and see that they are definitely treating us differently. On top of that, if it was like a lifestyle issue or something, we would see greater rates in lower income communities of the higher, mortality rates in birthing parents and children. But we don't see that. Actually, as you get into the higher income brackets, the highest income bracket is the absolute worst for Black women to give birth in. They die at 5 times the rate of their white counterparts versus 3 times in the lower income. We have the best results in about middle class areas, and even then it's like 2.7. So it's still, it's still like 3 times the rate. So yeah, it's absolutely medical racism. It doesn't help that this country is, like I said, we're 15 to 20 years behind in medical research as far as birthing. We have there's so much, pressure to like give birth in hospitals, which is, counterintuitive. You go anywhere else in the world, people don't give birth in hospitals unless it's a serious complication. Yeah, I mean, it's really frustrating. And that's why I prioritize communities of color, is specifically for that, because even though I have a hard time speaking up for myself, I will speak up for you in a second. Like, I will fight, it won't take very long. Yeah, I think that having a witness is just hugely beneficial. Really, really frustrating. And then when people learn that, they don't want to have kids once again. Like, yeah, and it makes it really scary. Like, and I get it. Like I said, I was, like that one nurse who was abusing me, she yanked me out of the bed at one point, and like tried to force me on my feet, and I hit the ground because I told her like I had like a knee injury, so I had to put weight on my knee slowly, and she was like, okay, and then yanked me up, and so I collapsed. And like after just having a cesarean. Yeah, so I mean this was the next day. And when she pulled out my catheter, I cried for like 12 hours afterwards. It hurt so bad. And then I found out you're not supposed to feel them pull out a catheter. Like, you might feel it a little bit, but you're not supposed to be in pain where you're crying for 12 hours. Like, so yeah, I don't want that to happen to anybody else. And like, I mean, she might have just been, somebody who liked abusing people, or maybe she was racist too. I don't know. It doesn't matter to me. Like, all I know is like, I don't want to let that shit happen to anybody else.
What factors do you think contribute to a healthy pregnancy, an ideal birth, and a successful transition into the parenting period?
Oh my gosh. So, having, once again, adequate support. I think that the pregnant people, they need to be, because pregnancies are so different, but we have these weird expectations on people that like, it doesn't really matter how bad your pregnancy is, unless you're put on bed rest, you should still be working just as hard. Like, some people will tell you, oh, you shouldn't work at all too. And then, that bothers some pregnant people because they want to work. Like, but I think we need to listen to people more. And, if someone's pregnant and they feel like that they, need to rest more, like, they shouldn't have their income cut for that. Like, there needs to be a way that these people, or that we can all be taken care of. One of the biggest reasons cited for abortion is that people don't know how they're going to afford the 6 weeks after they have the baby. That's fucked up to me. Like, and I'm not anti-abortion. I am pro-choice. But I also, once again, don't want people having abortions because our country sucks. Like, that sucks for you. Some people, it doesn't. I'm just touching the mic, man. I'm sorry. Some people don't, they're not as mentally affected by abortions, but some people are. That's very traumatic. So let's just avoid, and it's painful. Let's avoid all that if we don't have to. I think that, making sure that we had like child care, that we have sufficient health care. I think we need to do a lot less of like, a lot of doctors, they don't tell you very much before they do it too. So a lot of people end up feeling violated while they're in labor. If your doctor doesn't say like, oh, I'm about to stick my hand inside, they'll just go and do it. It's like, oh, there's a hand in my vagina now. I think that it's really just like, if somebody feels supported, I feel like for the most part, it's just gonna be easier. We just, we need to look at the material conditions and see where are people tending to fail and how do we come together to make it so they can be successful. We're supposed to be a super advanced country or whatever, but when we look at how civilization arose, it was because we provided for each other and we worked in community. I mean, if aliens came here and saw the amount of poverty and homelessness we have, they wouldn't think we're an advanced country. They would be like, what the hell is this? You know what I mean? Like, it's not this, I don't know where this idea comes from that we're so advanced, and yet, like, we literally could solve so many problems, and we just don't because we have that bootstrap mentality. And it just, yeah, I mean, it's like leaving your house dirty because you're mad that other people aren't cleaning or something, which, you know, okay, but then your house is dirty. Yeah, and so according to studies, when people have the best birth experiences, they always tend to say that like they felt listened to and heard. So even if the birth outcome wasn't exactly what they wanted, like if somebody wants a natural birth, an unmedicated birth, we'll say that, and they end up having to have a C-section, that can be very disappointing, speaking from experience. But if you felt like your doctors listened to you, then it still is a much better experience versus where I was like, kept telling my doctor, I don't want to have a C-section. I don't want to have a C-section. And they were like, okay, but we're scheduling it for this day, you know, and it's like, okay, like, can I tell them no? I didn't know if I could tell them no without them dropping me, and I didn't want to have to try to find another, you know, OB that late in my pregnancy. We need to listen to what people need and then support them in that, and to not assume that people are lazy or have ill intent. I think that it'd be a huge thing.
As a mother, what type of questions do you ask yourself from time to time?
Oh my God, I ask so many questions. I'm constantly asking if I'm screwing my kids up. All the time. There are things though that, you know, are good signs, like, and that make me feel like I'm doing a good job. But
what are those signs?
Like when I see that it looks like my children have a secure attachment, that helps me feel more confident in my parenting abilities. My oldest son likes to call me a lot. He's 12, but when he's with his dad, he likes to call me every day, which I think is cute. I don't call him really, like, he just wants to talk to me. I'm like, that's adorable. I'm always asking myself, like, you know, am I doing what I was taught, or am I doing what feels right? And then also because I wasn't treating my mental health up until the last few years, the OCD would really interfere with me. I had maternal OCD also, which is, do you guys know what that is? Do you want me to explain it, or?
Yeah, I don't know what that is.
You can explain it.
So basically it's obsessive compulsive disorder where it tends to happen after you have a child, and then you hyper focus on yourself as a parent, and so you feel everything you're doing is wrong. So like my maternal grandfather was a rapist and just a horrible human being. And so, like, being mentally ill, I was always very scared. Like, what if, what if that, you know, that's in me? That is in me. Like, it's, you know, it's part of my, like, not bloodline, I guess, but yeah, like, it's, that's my grandfather. I've never met him. He died when my mother was 8, so, So I would feel like, well, what if I give my kids too much attention? Like, am I going to end up sexually abusing my kids? Am I physically abusing my kids? Am I not feeding them right? It was awful. And then I would basically convince myself that, like, if I'd make a mistake, I would get really, really upset. And then I would be like, okay, you know, I'm going to end up screwing up my kids the way my parents screwed me up. And I'm going to abuse them worse and worse. I would have nightmares where I would, like, abuse them, or I'd kill them, and I'd wake up sobbing, and would have panic attacks for days. And like, it just convinced me that because I'm having those dreams and stuff, that meant that that's what I was going to do. And I ended up having a suicide attempt because I had a couple actually, because of it, because I thought I was going to hurt my kids. And so I was like, the only way to save them then is to remove myself. I can't just leave because then the income is gone. So, you know, it was literally going crazy. Now I try to ask myself more, am I raising my children in a way that fits the principles and how I want to live my life? So I'm an abolitionist, so we decided that we're not going to do punishments, really. Like, we don't do punishments. There's still negative consequences to things. But like with my youngest, they don't like to go to bed. If they are taking too long, I tell them, listen, it's really important for you to take care of your body. You need sleep. And when you don't get enough sleep, you spend the next day really cranky. You have a hard time getting things done. You can't focus. You're upset. I don't want that for you. So if we are taking too long to get ready for bed tonight, tomorrow we're going to have to start earlier. And we're going to, so that we can get in bed earlier, we're going to have to stop, watching TV, the tablet, all that stuff at an earlier time to make sure we can take care of ourselves. So it's still almost like the same things happening, like, oh, you're going to bed early tomorrow, but we're reframing it. Now we are taking care of our bodies. I always am now explaining too why we're doing this, instead of just telling them, you have to listen to me because I'm the adult, which can also set them up for grooming. That's partially why I wanted to change that. It's, now I try to have a discussion with them. And of course, like, I still will make my youngest brush their teeth. Sometimes we just argue about it for a really, really long time if they don't want to brush them. But I try not to physically force things unless it's super necessary, I just tell them, because I tell them, whatever happens, and then we're going to deal with the consequences. Because, I just, like, when the way I kind of thought about it is, what happens when like, your brother is about to do something stupid. Like, if your brother went to his ex's new boyfriend's house with a gun, what are you going to do? You're going to go and stop your brother. You're probably not going to call the cops, and you're probably, you might be able to resolve it all on your own very well. And so that doesn't mean your brother will necessarily ever do that again. People make mistakes, and that's a very malicious thing too, and our children are not doing anything that malicious. So why should I be using this carceral mindset on them when they're literally just trying to learn how to be people? Like, of course they are going to screw up constantly. They have no idea what they're doing. So, I just, that's really been my guiding principles lately, is just trying to make sure that they have full autonomy, that I'm treating them as full people and still caring for all their needs and making sure all their needs get met. But it also is helping my mental health a lot to not scream anymore. I mean, sometimes my youngest does get me to bicker sometimes. They know how to push my buttons. But and things work better too. Like, my youngest is 6, and they will, sometimes if an argument goes on too long, I'll just say, can you please just trust me? Like, do you trust me to take care of you? Do you believe that I'm always going to make the decision that I believe is best for you? And they'll be like, fine. Even at 6. I just think it helps explaining why we're doing this. But and it can still be a challenge, obviously. Like, it's not always easy. It's very rarely easy, but it's easier now that we're into the habit of it. And it's easier than what it used to be, like, before we did this.